Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I am your ever Shorty, and surprise, surprise, biggest release of the week. It's absolute Batman, and it is absolutely Batman. Nobody can deny that one. Look at him; he looks like Batman. Right, I'm going to give you a bit of a warning for this one. I'm almost certainly going to go for 5 minutes, and I'll probably talk about a bunch of stuff which isn't really about the comic book because it comes out at a point when I've been thinking about the big two and how they approach storytelling and how my biases may affect my interpretation of them. So we're going to start with just some random stuff first. Apologies. I promise I'll eventually get and tell you if it's a good comic book. To start with, yes, I do find it quite tedious and frustrating to keep reviewing the same kind of DC and Marvel stuff where it's another issue one of the same character in a slightly different situation with maybe stuff that might change but almost certainly won't, and eventually be back in the costume and on the street doing exactly what they have done before. Find it boring. I much prefer reading slightly smaller stuff, I mean, like any image down, really. Even when they're dealing with, like, previously established IP, they tend to do some interesting stuff with them. I'm really looking forward to Ahoy's Toxic Avenger, which I'm probably going to read and review later on this week. I just feel like Marvel and DC are so determined to maintain their fan base that they balk at the idea of totally changing something, and even when they do, they still want to make it as accessible as possible to people who liked that thing. Best example would be the Ultimate Universe from Marvel. I never read that much of the original stuff, but I am getting quite into the current stuff, and as much as I'm enjoying it, I'm liking the changes they've made. The Ultimate and Ultimate Spider-Man are both fantastic. It does also feel like, well, it being part of the Marvel multiversal theory idea means that it's not going to be completely... I mean, we literally have characters which, you know, have a basis within the more popular Marvel universe. And it feels, again, like there's always an intent to make it so no matter how different things start, they are going to be recognisable to the people who grew up reading stuff like Spider-Man, or even grew old reading stuff like Spider-Man. I think DC has options to do something a bit more different. They've had their, much like Marvel do their slightly off-kilter what-ifs, DC have got things like the Elseworlds, which allows them to do completely different things, but understanding it is nothing ever to do with an ongoing kind of thing. It's usually a small 6 to maybe 12 issue series. Maybe there'll be a spin-off for it, but in the end it's literally a self-contained story, and you don't need to worry too much about it. It is designed for a different market. Absolute Batman feels like, well, after the Absolute Power thing, it is, again, much like the Marvel stuff, it is tied into the DC multiversal theory, and as such, I'm feeling like, well, okay, it's going to be much of a muchness then. Sorry, I'm itching my nose, I've got a bit of a dry cold thing going on, so I do apologise. Right, so we're going to talk about my biases now, because after I've said all that, you're probably thinking, well, this doesn't sound like something you're going to be really enthused about, Shorty, and you'd be right, but it's not just that, it's also the fact that it's Snyder. And some of you might also be thinking, what the hell are you talking about, Shorty? You love Snyder. And it's like, yes, recently I have genuinely enjoyed his stuff. I'm not going to criticise his Batman stuff too much at all. It was like a career-defining run for him and also a character-defining run for Batman. But I've much preferred his more recent stuff. Clear, fantastic. Canary, fantastic. The Dark Space stuff, absolutely brilliant. And, well, Duck and Cover and a whole bunch of other Comixology or, like, spin-off stuff he's done have been brilliant. When I found out I was going back to DC, I was a little bit like, well, okay, fair enough. I guess they're going to pay me a whole bunch of money, and I can't really complain about that. Artists, no matter, like, you know, how successful they may be, still got to eat, and it gives them a chance to do something with, you know, another career or genre-defining story, and I can't complain about him wanting to do that, but it was never something I thought I'd be that excited about. But I do say that biases can be harmful. The idea of going something with expectation means you're more likely to just, you know, see that expectation mirrored back on you. I see this all the time with people who have certain opinions about movies and TV shows. People even watch them and dismiss them, and I don't like that. I like the idea of changing it. Don't get me wrong. All humans have biases. They have previous expectations. They make assumptions. It's not something I'm going to say you shouldn't do. For instance, fellas, if you're going to vote Trump, you're probably a bit of an arsehole. But Snyder is not an arsehole. He's a nice guy. I've met him. Shorter than you'd think, but then so am I. And he seems like a really nice guy that I'd like to hang out and have a drink with and have a chat with. So I thought, right, okay, let's drop all that. Let's actually go and read it. And as I was flicking through, a different idea occurred to me. Based just on a vibe and an aesthetic, it reminded me of something a terrible human being once did on a website where they came up with the idea that if you're given a very basic description of a character as it exists in an already established IP, but you don't have any of the extra baggage to go with it, you could do something completely different. The possible example I'm remembering from my head would be Peter Parker is a teenager in Queens, I think, who was bitten by a radioactive spider, and it gave him powers and abilities much like a spider, and he decided to use that for the greater good and to fight crime. There's no reason at all that why that in your head would go to a guy in a costume with webs on it. There's so many other things you can do with that basic concept. And people did. People put up their ideas for characters based on nothing but that, thus then showing that the form creates stories. If you have something that looks completely different, you give them stories which aren't just possible when it's a guy in a costume, just that, you know, looks very humanoid and he is effectively just a guy in a costume. This one reminded me of that because in a very, very basic way, Bruce Wayne as a kid went through a traumatic experience, and he took that trauma and his obsession with bats to decide to protect good people and fight crime by inspiring terror in criminals. Take that as just a base idea for it, and you flick through and see Batman, and it's like, okay, that actually does make sense to me. The most obvious one being, I wouldn't imagine somebody who wanted to look like a bat would necessarily go for a cape. Bats' wings are not this separate thing. They have limbs. The wings are just just another bit of limbs. They don't have feet, arms, and then wings. They're not insects. So designing it where the actual bits of the bats come from the hands and the arms, that actually makes a lot more sense to me, and is also more inhuman and more terrifying. Don't get me wrong. Capes and cowls look cool, but people wear them to go to the opera, that's not necessarily terrifying. The way Batman looks in this is. Also down to his physicality, the fact that he's not a billionaire trust fund kid, or, well, just, you know, being the heir of a billion fortune. He actually just needs to be more physical. This might be an issue where some people might turn against it. I mean, I like the idea that Batman is great at what he does because he has the resources and intelligence to be better at an awful lot of things. Even if you dislike it, I think the Batman vs Superman fight scenes with Batman involved show that Batman is better, not just at fighting, but being better prepared, and actually uses the environment and his gadgets around him. This one, when we get to combat, feels far more like it's just Batman kicking the crap out of people. But now we're getting into the actual topic of the comic book, so let's actually do this properly. It's really good. No matter what you might think of Snyder and the career decisions he's made, he is a fantastic writer, and I'll stand by that one. I don't think I've read anything by him where I've just thought that is badly written. Maybe some of his tail end of his Batman stuff, I just thought, okay, I'm kind of done with this as a concept, and I wasn't really getting into it. But most of the stuff he's done, I genuinely do like. And he's on top form here. This is like a career best kind of moment that he's building towards, and it is only issue 1, so I don't want to like pump it too much, but yeah, it feels like that's what he's doing. He's creating like an entire world for this character, and he's putting all these other people into it. Another potential criticism here, we get like an awful lot of other people from the Batman world in this comic book. Most notably, we get to see Killer Croc literally in the comic book. Selina Kyle gets name checked, and it feels like maybe there's this intent to get the gang together and then just be like this world's version of their characters from the real world, from the Prime Universe, which is, you know, not that big a leap to make, but I like the idea that it's something different, and it's going to take these characters, give them their unique backstories, and let the backstories shape who they are, and let their shape then define the story, which is what he's doing for Batman. The most notable of these is Pennyworth, who appears to have absolutely nothing to do with Batman's family. He is, I was going to say was, but he is an actual spy, an agent of empire, if you will. The worst kind of James Bond, where he is literally the sharp edge of British foreign policy. The aim is to basically go around and disrupt nation states to cause havoc so Britain stays on top of things. This is not an unusual thing for spies to be doing, it's fairly common. And he does this and encounters Batman. And no real major spoilers here, but it's generally nice to see this person who had no connection to Bruce Wayne or Batman look at what he's doing and see something to be respected there in how he does it. Not just how he does it, but how good he is at doing it. Like I said, there's more actual combat in this one, and it comes down to him just being really, really good at it. Not in a supernatural kind of way, like he spent his childhood and his teenage years and his early 20s going off around the world learning mystical, magical art, combat kind of stuff. Literally just really, really good at what he does, and able to use that very, very effectively. Also his physicality. I can't stress this enough. He's built like a brick outhouse because he needs to be. He doesn't have an awful lot of other backing for him, so he needs to be the biggest, most terrifying you've ever seen in your life, and he used that physicality brilliantly. Just that thing of like pushing your shoulder blades back and lifting your neck up. Just doing that when you're Batman size looks really, really terrifying. His costume goes really well into it as well. And we see Pennyworth as this outer person, like he's our reader insert a little bit, experiencing the world for the first time, seeing all what's going on. And it's fantastic. It's really well written, and it does add to the story and adds to the mythos of what's going on. Plus, we use him to get some background, basically some exposition, which doesn't feel like it needs to be shown too much. We just have him telling us what he's found out, and it works really well. It keeps the story moving at a pace. Artist-wise, Nick Dragotta is absolutely amazing at this one. The primary thing I'm going to be talking about here is combat, but it's worth, again, talking about his character design. Batman looks amazing. So much thought's gone into the costume that I really, really appreciate. One of which is, yes, he has the massive neck muscles, but there's a little bit which seems like it's a bit too big. And I don't know, this might be just him like really accentuating physicality, but I know people who play rugby, and I watch professional rugby league. Their costumes, well, their costumes, what they wear when they play has extra protection just here because it's a very dangerous point to get hit, and I like the idea that that might just be part of his work in there because it's a very simple thing to do and actually does afford quite a bit of protection. But the fact that he uses the wings as extended parts of fighting, he's except for with knives, he uses his pointy ears as knives. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But it is the combat itself which I really like, because there are moments of like big bold things. You get to see Batman jumping into gunfire as a nice single-page splash. It looks brilliant, simple but effective. It does everything you need it to do. But when we get to actual fight scenes, it's really tight, really controlled. He uses paneling and onomatopoeia breaks really, really effectively to show like a stuttering movement through time, as if we're seeing it through multiple camera angles, pulled kind of quickly and tightly where it needs to be. It's nothing that big and expansive in the combat, but it works better. It feels more visceral and more brutal because of it. There are some fantastic city shots. It's really nice double page spread of just a hand holding a gun, which are really, really effective. And he does fantastic things with his colorist, Frank Martin. There's a wonderful bit where you have Batman doing that thing of standing on a rooftop, cape going, but he's got the sun set behind him and it's going through the clouds of Gotham. It looks absolutely beautiful. But he's pretty much just a figure of black with occasional highlights on it. Very, very effective, simple but beautiful. All in all, I'm not necessarily saying I was on the fence for this one, but my expectations were not just met, but they were exceeded by quite a while. Genuinely think this could be amazing, and it might still, even though there's only been a couple before the end of the year, it might make it onto best of the year list. And I've just looked how long I've been talking to this camera right now, so for everyone who usually gets my 5-minute videos, sorry about that, but this is worth talking about. That's it for me for now, though. I do have some other stuff to review, like Toxic Avenger. So if you've managed to put up with all this, thank you very much. Until I see you all again, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye!